look over the edge. If you're not looking over the edge, you're not looking far enough, don't worry. There are plenty of people behind you that will pull you back.
All right, I'm so excited for this conversation. He's the CMO of BetMGM. Casey Hurbis joins us on the program. Casey, what's going on, man? Thanks for the time.
Dave, how you doing today? Things are good. Looking forward to a nice weekend. NFL's just kicked off, and so it's
Yeah,
uh it's our busy time of the year.
let's talk some shop, man. So I always like to start with kind of a random icebreaker, but I know you're a proud Detroit guy with deep roots in sports. So if you had to build that Detroit Mount Rushmore, who are we
Ooh.
going with?
All right. Well, the Mount Rushmore of Detroit athletes. I'll do athletes.
There
I
you
assume
go.
that's what you want.
There you
It's
go.
also indicative of my age, right? So I'm a
Okay.
Gen Xer. So
Yeah,
first and foremost, the GOAT himself, Barry Sanders. He goes up on the
absolutely.
board. My personal hero growing up, Hall of Famer, Detroit Tigers, Alan Trammell,
Okay.
shortstop. I'm gonna go around the horn. I'm gonna go with four teams, right?
Okay.
Detroit Pistons.
Ooh.
Got to go with Zeke, number 11,
Hmm.
Isaiah Thomas. He goes up on Mount Rushmore. And then hockey, I could go old school and go Gordie Howe, but I was a Steve Yzerman guy and Steve Yzerman, and so I'll go Stevie Y. So
I love
Barry,
it.
Barry, Tram, Zeke, and
No, they're hard. They're
Stevie
hard
Y.
to argue. I like that.
Yeah.
Awesome. And then you got like you can do Magic as a Michigan State, I guess, like kind of in
Yeah.
that same,
Well, we could go
anyways, there's
deep.
a you go really deep in that. So listen, I'm excited to talk to you just because you've had such an incredible career spanning so many different industries, rocket mortgage, automotive. Now you're in the gambling space, which I'm sure is new and fresh and fun for you as well. But how do you describe your journey as marketing is such a fun space to be in, but it's also fun to tap into different industries. So how do you describe your journey?
Yeah, and so I've been in marketing now for, geez, once again, dating myself, 30 plus years.
Hmm.
And I'm born and raised in Detroit. And when you're born and raised in Detroit, you're born with a set of keys in your hand. And like a lot of people in Detroit, I went right into automotive marketing and advertising out of college and had an amazing 24-year run, both agency and client side, all on Chrysler business. And in
Yep.
2017, I got a fateful phone call to, come speak, and ultimately became the chief marketing officer for Rocket Mortgage. Was Quicken Loans, and then led the rebrand to Rocket Mortgage, which is the city of Detroit's actually largest employer. And that was an amazing run for 7, 8 years, running an in-house agency. Challenger brand, went to number one in the category. And this past December, I was asked to, hang up my Detroit hat, if you will, and
Yeah.
though I still live in Detroit, and move to into a very exciting industry of online sports betting and iGaming with BetMGM, and it's been 8 months, and it's been a wild, fun ride already.
I was curious to ask you about your Rocket Mortgage background because,
Yeah.
you're talking about a certain industry that you kind of have to reinvent, and you did that, like back to back number one Super Bowl commercials and the Mortgage Classic and the PGA Tour. I mean, it seems like you kind of went in and were a big spearhead of like, let's shake things up, let's be new, let's be fresh, let's be different. How do you navigate that? How did that whole process go for you?
Yeah, great question, David. I mean,
Yeah.
the first it starts with transformation as well as innovation, and the story with
Mm.
Quicken Loans and Rocket Mortgage, like very traditional brick and mortar,
Right.
with local offices, and then in really starting the early 2000s and ultimately in 2016 when they launched Rocket Mortgage and end-to-end mortgage origination. I mean, if you think about that, right? How that was a very, I won't call it controversial, but that was a big topic back
Mm.
then because we were just 3 or 4 years removed from the biggest recession we've seen in a
Yeah.
generation. And all of a
Yep.
sudden it's push button, get mortgage. And now, like anything else, 8 years later, everyone's got an end-to-end, online mortgage
Yep.
origination. And so with that brand, it's a very busy space. I mean, there's upwards of 50,000 places you can get a mortgage in this country.
Crazy.
The analogy I've given in the past, David, is nobody wakes up in the morning and says, "Oh my gosh, today's the day I'm getting a hot water heater, set of tires, a mattress, or a mortgage." So how do you make something? No, listen, the insurance category has been doing this for,
Yep.
10, 20 years. And
Hmm.
so that was kind of that page of that book is how do you take something that, let's just be honest, isn't it's an intangible product, it's a commoditized product, and how can you
Commoditized,
make
yeah.
it interesting? So when somebody is making the number one, number two biggest purchase in their life, how can Rocket Mortgage be right at the top of that consideration set? And so that was by like, all right, let's tap into sports, let's tap into culture, entertainment. Let's do things that, that allow that Rocket Mortgage be top of mind, but also behind the scenes, obviously, from a product and client service standpoint, make sure it's an amazing experience. Because if you think about
Right.
it, right, you're only doing it once every 3, 5, 7, 10 years, and you want to be able to have a great experience. And so that was also a big secret of the success was, the client focus that from a product and, client service standpoint, led to a lot of the success for Rocket Mortgage.
I'm assuming when you're in those brainstorm sessions with a commoditized product like that, you're trying to show up where people already are. So when that moment does happen, Rocket Mortgage is top of mind. Is that like where everything begins when it comes to innovation, ideation, just being authentic to those different spaces you're in?
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
again, knowing that you're not, this is not quick serve restaurant. It's not a product that you're using every single day. And we're very fortunate that budgets were very healthy. I mean, the share of voice that Rocket Mortgage has and still has over, the other non-banks or the banks, I mean, it dwarfs. I mean, so there's a healthy expenditure, but it's also about being in the right place at the right time. And so
Right.
obviously with the changing media landscape, that's evolved quite a bit over the last 5, 10 years. But just by virtue of being in the right place and so being top of mind, that was like a big part of the investment strategy was yes, awareness, but a positive opinion and consideration. So when he, she, or they is moving into that, like, all right, well, maybe we're eligible to buy, we're
Yeah.
financially ready, or we're selling, or whatever it might be, how can Rocket Mortgage be at the top of that consideration set? I mean, it's like the automotive world. I mean, back before the internet, people used to shop 5, 6 brands, and with e-commerce and sites, and now people are shopping 1 to 2 brands. Same thing with mortgages. I
Yeah.
mean, they're not shopping 50,000, they're maybe shopping 2 or 3. So how do you become at that top of that consideration set, just with the wealth of information and knowledge that's available to you?
Yeah, and I've talked a lot about this on the podcast and with clients. It's really about this idea of a lot of brands make mistakes, I think, where they're trying to like hijack the culture rather than create with it. And I've seen a lot of brands make this mistake where they know that being in front of a sports audience could be successful, but they're just talking at them and CTA after CTA and just like
Yep.
as a fan, you're like, get out of my face. I don't want to see this. And almost can have the adverse effect of what you're trying to do, which is build that awareness in a positive, authentic way. I'm sure you've had to navigate that too, but any insight or advice on how you've been able to straddle that in terms of getting into those new spaces in sports?
Yeah, and you just gave a great example. I mean, I think a mistake that brands continue to do, and listen, I've been guilty of it in my past, where you end up putting work out in the right environment, but it's work that literally you're just talking to yourself, and I
Self-serving.
mean,
Yeah.
self-serving, right? And
Yeah.
it gets an applause in the sales room, in the sales meeting on Monday, or in the
Yep.
boardroom, but at the end of the day, you're a brand that's like Charlie Brown's teacher. It's like, what did I just watch in that 6, 15, or 30 seconds? They just said 15 things of which I have no idea. And
Yeah.
with Rocket Mortgage, like we never spoke about rate. It was about client service, and we're here when when we're here for you. How can we make the complex simple? Because it's such an intimidating process, right? And we didn't rely on rates and or incentives, if you will. It was about being there at the end of the day. Clients want in any business, clients want to know that they're being taken care of,
Yeah.
right? Do you have my
Yep.
best interest in heart? And can I trust that when I do business with you, that you have my best interests at heart?
And I think too, use like the date analogy, but I think too many brands are trying to propose on the first date. Like, how about we get to know each other, let you know like that I'm interested in learning more, but you don't have to have every tagline, every value prop that is just jumped into a 30-second first time I've ever heard of you type thing, right?
Exactly right.
Yeah. I want to get into BetMGM, of course. So you mentioned that you were appointed in December of 24. Again, a fast-growing industry, an industry with a lot of like legal ramifications and state differences. And like, I'm sure you've had to just like wrap your head around all those different do's and don'ts on that side. But what's been the most exciting challenge as you step into this new industry in the gambling space?
Yeah. And thankfully for me, I moved from automotive after 24 years into mortgage, and that was a shock. I mean, it was a shock to the system, right? When you've only worked in one category for so long, and then on a Friday and on Monday you're in a
Yeah,
totally new
yeah,
category. So I had that experience. So I mean, to be vulnerable, like my panic isn't as much as it was 8 years ago, moving from mortgage over from auto over to mortgage. So there's some similarities, quite honestly, is they're all very highly regulated businesses,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Mortgage, automotive. But what's been interesting from my perspective is those are also 60 and 90-year regulated markets and industries.
Right,
Let's be honest, like the online sports betting and iGaming, like it's kind of like NIL. I mean, at the end of the day, this is a 6, 7, going on an 8-year-old, category in the
hmm
industry, of which every state, I mean, there's a federal, obviously, but then from a state, right now we operate in 29 states plus Ontario,
right,
right? About
right.
50% of the population. There are large states like California and Texas and
That's
Florida
recent too. Yeah.
where it's not regulated, if you will.
hmm
There are operators there, and obviously we can have the whole discussion of the non-regulated noise with poly and prediction markets. But from a regulated standpoint, we operate in 29 states plus Ontario, and it's unique. I mean, I spend a lot of my time as we look at either go-to-market strategies, creative media, ambassadors of, okay, well, can this work in Pennsylvania or Ontario where there are different rules and regulations by state? And so it's very tedious. It's tedious, but it's for the right thing because,
hmm
again, as I mentioned earlier, we want to make sure we're doing the right thing on behalf of our players. So as our players, download the app, they deposit, and they want to have a great experience, we got to make sure we're always keeping our players and their experience in mind while adhering and obviously to the state regulations.
You mentioned it's a crowded space, and I think just as a consumer and a sports fan, it just feels like there's, in the world of 100 deposit gets you 100 in free bet, and use your friend referral code and get $50 free for your first bet. Obviously, to your point, you need to develop a brand that people trust and kind of like start to build a community around because there is so many options and there is so much noise out there. So I know when you first came in, I'm sure you saw that. And it's like, how do you start to approach how you differentiate yourself in such a crowded marketplace?
Yeah, I mean, David, I'll give you an example. Michigan. I live in Michigan, commute to
hmm
Jersey almost every week. I mean, I've upwards of 70 operators in the state of Michigan, and Michigan is one of four
Crazy.
sports OSB and iGaming. So there's four OSB and iGaming states: West Virginia, Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. So there's
Yep.
70 operators here. I mean, I'm gonna leave after this podcast. I'm gonna drive downtown Detroit, and I'll probably pass 75 billboards between here and Little
Yeah.
Caesars
Yeah.
Arena, and marijuana is also legal. So it's like the only billboards I see anymore are marijuana, lawyers, and sports
Yep.
betting or
Yep.
casino business. So to that point, over the last 6 or 7 years, think of the funnel. As a new state opens, and there's only been one state that's opened in the past year, that was North Carolina. So as
hmm
states open, there's all that top of the funnel, right? Like how can we get people to download the app, first time deposit, and experience the product? And then that's slowed down quite a bit. I mean, obviously you're going to have churn, people that may stop, people that have turned 21, or people that
hmm
say, all right, I want to start engaging with an OSB or iGaming product. And so, yes, acquisition is important. That will never cease. But as the category matures, it's now about like the average sports bettor and iGaming player carries three apps.
Hmm.
Like, so how many credit cards do you carry, David?
Yeah. Four?
Four. I carry four or
Yeah.
five. How many credit cards do you use on a pretty regular basis?
I would say two of them. I have
Two
two
of them.
Amexes, like a
All
personal and a
right.
company.
Don't tell me yet. But do you know the
Yeah.
interest rates on all four of those cards?
No.
Zero.
No.
I have no idea. And I
Yeah.
guarantee your credit card is probably tied to airline, hotel, Nordstrom's, or some shopping,
hmm
right? Or
Yep.
personal affinity. What we see is, so that if you think about it, acquisition is important, but as it comes into this space, it's all about like loyalty and rewards, like in wallet share, kind of like credit cards. So what we love our position in the marketplace is one is you have to deliver a competitive product,
Right.
a great user experience, but what's going to take that person that has two, three, four apps and listen, and like if I'm going to lay a bet on the Tigers tonight, I'm not looking across six of my apps to go, all right, who's got the
You have a
best odds
go-to.
or
Yeah.
what's my bonus? Like I don't have that kind of time, but like I exclusively use one because I love their rewards program. And
Hmm.
that's buying my loyalty, if you will, or I'm using that app exclusively because of their loyalty program. And so, what we love about our position with BetMGM is, where we're unique versus the market leaders is we have brick and mortar, right? We have
Yeah.
20 properties in the US, nine on the strip. Over 45 to 50% of our players go to Vegas every year. So think about that connectivity between BetMGM and MGM Resorts. Quite honestly, most players and most people see BetMGM and MGM Resorts as one and the same,
Yeah.
i.e., like, all right, yeah, I'm with MGM. I've been with MGM 20 plus years. Rewards, they don't really maybe they don't see the difference between, the land-based casinos and the product, the digital product. So that's what we love our position in the marketplace because Vegas, if you will, or the properties, whatever it might be, they are
That's your
important.
differentiator. Yeah, nobody else
Big
has that.
differentiator. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I want to talk about your legendary Make It Legendary campaign.
Yeah,
First of all, Mad Men's one of the best shows of all time. So big Jon
yeah,
Hamm guy. But I know a lot of different of your competitors too. They go big on these large campaigns with likable figures, whether it's Drewski or like you guys obviously Jamie Foxx as well, which I'm a huge
yep.
fan of as well. But talk me through like those type of campaigns, and yeah, I think you just spoke to it. Like, how do you get the trust, the awareness, the consideration, and just overall how that campaign came to be?
Yeah, quite honestly, David, when I joined the company in December, one of my first task, or our first task, if you will, was reimagining the brand. And it's not just, all right, let's go form new creative and maybe a new spokesperson. And we went
Yeah.
all the way back to the beginning as a 6, 7 year old brand. All right, what is our position in the marketplace? Where do we have the right to win? How do our players or rejectors feel about us? And that's where we were able to develop some of these creative insights of like, wow, that connectivity to MGM really delivers endless possibilities. And then we asked ourselves, Jamie Foxx, amazing, was so important for the brand over the last 6 or 7 years. But as we evolve the brand, do we A, continue with Jamie? B, we work
Hmm.
with maybe somebody else, or C, maybe we don't have anybody. I mean, there are many brands that don't use it, or you create your own character, right? The
Yeah.
flows or whatever,
Yeah. Yeah.
Jake from State Farm.
Right.
And so a lot of that was strategy and research, and we saw that, utilizing, no names and faces helps elevate and the right names and face, obviously, helps elevate a brand and consideration. And so when we rolled out this work, I mean, it's not just a campaign, it's just reimagining what BetMGM stands for. I mean, we are right at the forefront of entertainment and gaming. We've got spirit of Las Vegas woven within our DNA. And,
Hmm.
as we started looking at that, we honestly started with over 30 talent, if you will. And some of that is qual and quant research. And then you start to reach out to, agents or friends that we know and go, hey, is somebody maybe interested? Are they interested? And if so, what does that start to look like? And quite honestly, I've never worked with talent in any of the brands I've worked with where it's, yes, there's a transactional element of that partnership, but it's sitting down and reviewing the creative and talking about the brand and getting shared equity from each other. And
Hmm.
we met Jon Hamm before we even made an offer to him. And, we talked about the brand and the creative. He's a huge sports guy. He's a Midwest, he's a Chiefs and a Blues
Yeah.
slappy. And it was very natural. And we're so fortunate not only to have worked with Jamie over the last 6 years, but now with the evolution and with our Make It Legendary campaign, now we're, working with Jon Hamm, who's, as you mentioned, huge.
I'm sure you've looked at the data of like what works and what doesn't work, especially with the avid gamer, the casual,
Yep.
based on different seasons like NFL versus NBA versus March Madness. I'm just curious, like, if there's anything that has surprised you about what makes certain people tick or what actually makes people download or try something, like anything interesting that just kind of that you geek out over.
Yeah, listen, there is certainly offer enticements, as you mentioned, right? It's
Hmm.
what is how do you get somebody to join? But that you can have a good subset of players that literally are just chasing the offer, right? Bet and gets
Yeah.
or first time deposits, whatever it might be, and then they move on. It's how do you drive that loyalty through, the player experience and rewards. It's interesting, like as I've joined the organization, we'll just talk about sports betting, like the ebbs and flows. Like it is super heavy the first 3 weeks of the season, right? And then
Yeah.
it's heavy all no matter what. I mean, NFL is almost half of the sports betting handle over the course of a year, but it's that weeks 1 through 3 are super heavy. And then I won't say it tailors off, but it all depends. It kind of like
Yeah.
levels off, if you will. And then as we move towards week 16, 17 in the playoffs, then you go. And so that
Hmm.
that like so that drives like some of the creative strategy, go to market strategy, think about media planning, the phasing
Yeah.
of it, social, when do you introduce either enhancements, enticements, or promotions. And so for me, and then quite honestly, there are sports that tennis is huge. And I'm like,
Yeah.
really? And people that are avid bettors, sports bettors, they can bet tennis 24/7 and you can bet it by the
Yeah.
point. And so how do we have really interesting products or markets available for those, maybe they're more of a premium mass players, making a really good product available in niche sports is important.
Yep.
UFC is another good example. We have an amazing UFC product. It's not huge when it comes to handle, but for people that are into combat and MMA sports, like you gotta be there with a really good product and experience.
Yeah. So much has changed since you started your career when it comes to social. Like I started
Yeah.
the agency 12 and a half years ago, and I remember being in the broom closet as like, all right, and now we're like in the main conference room that the CEOs or the shareholders are walking out of. So it's becoming at the top of the agenda now for a lot of these different rollouts. I'm curious how you've looked at you have a Jon Hamm more like traditional large campaign, but you also have like your day-to-day influencer opportunities and building community organically and all those things. So now the distribution of all these things are so wide. I'm just curious how you look at the different buckets of how you reach out and talk to your consumer.
Yeah. Good example of is what you just mentioned. I mean, here we are talking about Jon Hamm and make it legendary. I mean, that's really at the top of the funnel, right? When it comes to
Hmm.
more of our mass media, linear, and then in the digital and social space, I mean, it's all about the creator economy, right? And that you mentioned, we have over 20 ambassadors that we work with.
Hmm.
And they're, in sports, we've got like Barry Sanders and Wayne Gretzky and Jeter. I call it our Mount Rushmore,
Yeah.
and Tim Howard on the soccer standpoint. And then you've
Now, was
got
Barry there before you were there? Or did you get Barry right
Barry was
away?
there. I worked with Barry
Okay,
at
good.
Rocket, and Barry was there. Wayne Gretzky was here, and
There you
we
go.
just partnered with Derek Jeter. We needed a
I love
baseball
it.
ambassador, and I couldn't think of anyone better.
I
And
love it.
so we've really been about building our own. I call it the BetMGM Mount Rushmore. And
Hmm.
but from a creator economy standpoint, think about it. That creator economy has grown 15 to 20% every year. There's upwards of $8 billion that's being spent in the US and the influencer
Yep.
economy. I mean, 80% of people are saying like purchase decisions. I think about myself. I'm 54 years old. Everything I buy nowadays is influenced by social, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's in my feed, the algorithm, or it's somebody I follow or whatever it might be. Like, here I am at 54 years old. And so for us, you can imagine the level of investment and time that we put into our digital and social, not only at the top of the funnel from an acquisition standpoint, but then how to create that loyalty and rewards, all the way through the funnel, whether you're a first time user of BetMGM or we're hoping that, maybe you've been quiet for a little bit, or we know you might be using another partner. How do we get you back? And so, that the media world is changing so fast. I mean, it's the fastest I've seen it in my 30 plus years. And, between, now the majority of sports viewing is on streaming,
Yep.
it's changing so fast. And it's not just the Gen Zs. I mean, it's everyone is making it their own.
And I think it's a easier, you're not necessarily trying to promote a Broadway musical and buy tickets. Like this is something where you're already scrolling Instagram, it gets in your feed, and you can literally go to the App Store and download it in that moment. So it's like that, I guess, ease of entry where you're already on your mobile device, you're already scrolling on social, just click over and download a Let's Play type thing. So it makes a lot of sense that you
It's
guys
also
are.
too, it's also too, think about the viewing experience we all now have
Mhm.
nowadays. I mean, when I was much younger, and if I wanted to, place a bet, it was like you'd go to the window, you'd place the bet, and then you'd come back at whatever, halftime or at the
Don't
end of
lose
the
your
game.
ticket.
Yeah,
Yeah.
don't lose your ticket. And now, just think about, I'll give you a good example. In the Super Bowl this past year, we had 1,500 markets open for the Super Bowl. Last year, we
Jeez.
had 500. And just
Wow.
the growth, and you see it across all of the OSPs,
Hmm.
is the growth with single game parlays, live action. Again, that's where also you need to be, from a digital social standpoint. If somebody is watching the game, they're either there, they're watching it, what's that second, third screen? And you're even seeing it in the mass media linear space where
Yeah.
how could I even serve an ad to David while he's watching the Knicks with a live odds update, right? I mean, you see brands
Yeah.
doing it, we're doing it in the digital and the social space. And now, like now that technology is there of how can I hit David with a a Knicks live game, blah, 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 because I know he loves watching the Knicks
Hmm.
or he bets
I'm
on the Knicks.
curious where you think the opportunity is or where this thing is going. I've talked to different colleagues of ours throughout the space that they think there's going to be a credit card swipe like screen at every seat in the US where you could actually like bet in real time and you're betting in between plays and
Yeah.
you've seen all these things, micro betting and all these things. So I'm just curious, maybe some things that you're excited about of where all this can go and how fans can even have more fun with this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, one as I mentioned is like opening up markets, and at the
Yeah.
end of the day, the players are going to dictate, what works, what doesn't work. In that, the feedback that we get from players is you've seen the huge growth with like single game parlays, live action. We
Hmm.
rolled out a unique product last year, Second Chance, right? In football, if you pick on Saquon to score the first touchdown and he doesn't get it, but he scores a second touchdown, you get your money back in bonus bets or cash. And so that is a lot of the feedback is always try to create, like how can we create unique markets or unique products that resonate with fans of that sport or in the iGaming, quite honestly, which is huge. We have over 5,500 games in our
Crazy.
iGaming. That's quite honestly probably an overlooked and underspoken about
Yeah.
category when it comes to this space. But we have 5,500 games, and some of the games that are the most popular with our players are co-branded with our partnerships, like a Detroit Lions or a Pittsburgh Steelers,
Mm.
or we have really unique brand partnerships with like Wizard of Oz and Friends. We just announced yesterday Price is Right. We're an exclusive iGaming partner now with Price is Right, where
Interesting.
people love that, right? So now you can play Plinko for money, or
That's
the
awesome.
old the yodeler, like it's how do you, and then that's again that's kind of like working with Jon Hamm. Now it's borrowing equity with as a Price is Right
Barn
or Wheel
equity.
of
I love
Fortune
that.
or Family Feud.
Yeah, how do you parlay, for lack of better terms,
Yeah,
that brand, that equity that's already built? That's awesome. I want
absolutely.
to zoom out a little bit and just get your brain on just overall marketing. And it kind of, I guess this will be a good transition question. As a CMO at BetMGM,
Yeah.
what are the one or two or three metrics and numbers you're looking at to determine we're right on pace, we're above pace, we're behind pace, I got to crack the whip? I'm just curious what that dashboard of those numbers look like for you.
Well, you could imagine in our business there is no shortage of data, analytics, or KPIs.
Yeah.
Without sharing all the secret sauce. I mean, you could
Yeah, of
imagine
course.
for us. You imagine for us. I mean, I could use the funnel as the example.
Hmm.
Obviously, as we think about downloads and first time deposits, that's at the top of the funnel. In which how many players are coming downloading the app, how many acquisitions, if you will, are we getting, and then it's that middle of the funnel, then all the way down relative to play, and whether it's sports betting or from the iGaming standpoint, how are our players engaging with the product, whether it's handle, and what is some of the behaviors that we're seeing. Quite honestly, from a marketing standpoint, what does crack the whip look like? Cracking the whip is when, we're not filling the top of the funnel. I mean, at the,
Yeah.
like, and, it's no different in the automotive or the mortgage business. I can't close a mortgage. I'm not an underwriter. I can't offer the rate. I can't help somebody's,
Yeah.
credit score, whatever it might be. And I would say in the automotive business, my job was to get someone into the door. I couldn't directly influence the sales process.
Right.
Once a human walked through that dealership or they got on the lot or whatever it might be, I'm not sitting at the F&I desk. I'm not sitting
Yeah.
with the underwriter and I'm not sitting with, trying to figure out like what is, the right play or whatever it might be. And so as a marketer, it's top of the funnel, but then also, what are we doing to provide value to our players to drive that engagement and or loyalty?
I heard a quote recently, do so much volume that it'd be unreasonable not to be successful. And I think to your
Yeah.
point, like
Yeah.
do so
That's my
much at the top of
CFO.
the
My
funnel.
CFO tells me that.
Yeah, exactly.
So
But
then I ask for the unreasonable budget, and he doesn't seem to
exactly.
agree.
That's the problem. It's
That's
always
where
the
that
cat and the
that's where that
mouse.
philosophy falls apart.
Yeah, but to your point, it's like if we're very, very heavy in top of funnel, then we can constantly tweak to make sure we're getting more efficient and
Yeah, I mean
all the way through the funnel.
the world we're living in today. I mean, it wasn't that long ago where it was like, all right, let's look at quarterly optimization.
Hmm.
Like, all right, what can
Yeah,
and that was even back then. It was like, whoa, wow, we're adjusting our media plans or go to market strategies quarterly. Now it's every week.
yeah.
Every week we're sitting down like, how did the weekend go, right? How did the weekend go? Where are there adjustments and where are the levers that can be pulled? And the world that we live in the digital, social, programmatic, whatever it might be space, that just the amount of data that comes in, how you analyze the data, and most importantly, the action you take out of it is when there's winners
Hmm.
and there's losers.
I don't want to get you to give away any secrets. However, I would love to know something since December 2024 that data told you, like something random, like between 3 minutes left at halftime
Yeah.
and kickoff, we found that it's a 4x increase. I don't know, but any like data point that came across your desk, like you got to be kidding me. That's amazing. We should double down on that as an insight.
Yeah, I'll go back in which and for us, we're also as part of our positioning and rebranding, we have our focus is on obtaining more of a premium mass elevated player, right?
Hmm.
And you could assign demographics to it, but it goes back to something we talked about earlier was like the eye-opening, like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize how important like and how well we do in tennis or in certain
Yeah.
communities, cricket. Like, and our premium mass, more elevated players, those, players that come multiple times a day or a week, like they love, to be able to have markets available in these niche sport. And that was like, I just
Hmm.
figured, all right, NFL is king and you go from there.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow. In MLB, for example, I mean, MLB handle is on par. Granted, there's 162 games, 32 on teams, but baseball too. I mean, think of
Yeah.
you could pull up your app tonight and like, you could bet the Tigers probably 400 ways after it's all said and done. And
That's awesome.
just really seeing the evolution of the markets and player behavior and being
Yeah.
able to like pivot or adjust to it is I think it's really interesting. Like I had no idea prior to joining. I'm like my purview into the online sports book and iGaming world was just purely as a consumer, a fan. And then now as you step
Of
behind the curtain,
course.
you're like, wow, it is so like just data in real time intense.
Well, and I'm sure too, there's so much complexities of the customer journey and the algorithm where it's like we know people are logging in between 9 and 10 a.m. Pacific on Sundays.
Yep.
Let's remind them that there's also a tennis match coming up at 1 o'clock. So let's do a parlay with that, or let's also bet on both. So I know the engineers are probably just crazy on the
Yeah,
algorithms and
with
what needs to be put in
SMS and
front too.
real-time pushes and
Yeah,
like
right.
half times like, hey, that's okay. Saquon didn't score in the first half. Take him,
Yeah,
like
right.
or real-time odds or that's how do you put your brand or message in front of the players, real time.
Let's talk some overall marketing philosophy because I know
Yeah.
you probably have some hot takes for me. So, what's one marketing term that you secretly hate or wish could be removed from the lexicon?
Ah, shit. Yeah, I got a whole list of what did synergy maybe. I don't
Yeah,
know. Like,
yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know. Like I go through my rants. There's always buzz. I mean, it's like it's funny, like you think about over the years, the last few years, like you felt like you were behind if you weren't doing something with NFT, 3 years
Yes.
ago, and
The
now it's
metaverse.
the meta, right? And I'm sitting there with glasses on, and people are yelling at me because like, what's our meta strategy? And
Yeah.
it's like anything else. And here we are with AI, but AI is not going away. And I've told people, like, I remember sitting in '99 in front of car dealers, and we were all laughing at the notion that one day you might buy a car online. Like that'll never happen. Shoes, yeah. Travel, sure.
That's
Music,
funny.
yeah. People will forever want to go to a dealership and sit
Test
with a
drive.
salesperson,
Yep.
test drive and blah blah. Like there was a moment in time in '99, 2012 and 12 to 16 with mobile and mobile and desktop flipping with the iPhone. And
Hmm.
I think we're right now at that another big pivotal moment when it comes to e-commerce marketing advertising with AI. I mean, it's you and I both know, like, I can't keep up. I try it as best as I can, but it's, just the use of AI, and it's all about scalability and efficiencies,
Hmm.
not replacements, if you will. But it's, for me, it's all about how do you utilize AI to scale and, be and drive personalization as well.
Yeah, I'm curious just to pull on that thread a little bit because I think in both of our seats, you listen to podcasts and you read things, and it's like we're in this weird place where do we have like a lot of time to kind of figure this out, or is the world ending in 5 years?
Yeah.
iRobot. Like I'm sure you've seen like these
Yeah.
different spectrums, and you've been through these different things. Like you mentioned, even recently, it's been the metaverse, it's been NFTs, and there's a lot of I think pressure. What's our move? What are we doing? And then people sometimes go way overboard, way too quickly, and then they regret that. So I'm just curious, as these different moments have happened throughout your career, have you found like a good way to I'm going to pay attention to it. I'm going to take it as serious, but I'm not going to go all in until I learn more about it. Like, how do you figure
Yeah.
out when it's time to move?
Yeah. I subscribe to the test and learn. I mean, in
Mm,
that as the metas, NFTs, whatever it might be, AI, for example. I mean, it's real easy, for new brands that maybe don't have a lot to lose, if you will, like they can just run to one end of the boat, and then you got brands that
yeah.
are like more traditional, a little more risk adverse. They're with a sit back and wait. I mean, the right thing is how do you organize yourself around, the technology? What is the ethical way to use it? And along
Yep.
the way, what is the testing and learning? Sure, yes. Do we use AI? You're darn right we do, right? In every facet of our business. Are we at a level that, some other brands or companies or industries are? No, but it's about how do you utilize it the right way. From a marketing standpoint, I mean, we use AI every day in creative. We're utilizing it more and more in, as we think about creative scaling and personalization and, media planning and optimization. But I have not done a full 30-second, like we've done spec work, but I
Yeah.
haven't done a full 30-second spot and put it on air. I'm not there yet, in that we could, but from in being in a very highly regulated, compliance,
Yep.
driven business, I'm a little hesitant to do it right now.
Yeah,
We'll
and
do things.
there's so many court cases in federal court right now with IP theft and copyright that these engines are using. It's like until I think my take on this is until there's like a royalty-free engine that we know is not stealing copyrighted work and or there's more of a Spotify subscription model where if it does use copyrighted work, it's paying those authors or what have you. I think that's as marketers what we're waiting for because right now there's a lot of, litigation that can happen that you open yourself up to if you use the wrong copyrighted work with those engines, right?
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly. I mean, we subscribe. I mean, granted, being in a very highly regulated business, and we one of our main philosophies is making sure we're doing the right thing, and that applies to the ethical use of AI. And so
Yeah.
we use a lot internally. We use it the right way across the thing, but it's we haven't scaled it as much as I have wanted to, but it's about walking versus sprinting.
Yeah. I love that. We talked about this a little bit. What do you think a mistake just in general that brands make when it comes to marketing in this current time?
Um, jumping on something or into something that they may have no right to be
Mm,
there. I mean, what you had, I think earlier you were talking about like ones that try to steal culture or lean into
hijack
culture
culture.
when they have
Yeah.
no right to
Yeah.
do it. Listen, I sound like any other CMO where it's like, hey, if you're going to do something, do it in an authentic way. I mean,
Yeah.
that's right out of the textbook.
Yep.
Um, but it's easy. I mean, it's no different. I get caught up in the same, I get caught up in the same fever of, I see something popping in my feed. I'm like, well, should we lean into this? And it's like, well, do we have the right to be there? And, should we be there?
Yeah.
Or all we doing is carpet bagging, a trend or whatever it might be. I mean, that's something that's very easy to get fallen in the trap of. Um, Talent as well. I mean, I get people that bring me talent all the time and like, well, we should work with them or what have you. And it's like, let's slow down in that,
Yeah.
if, I always say the two most important things that I have in my job as a CMO is to grow and protect this brand. And I'll be damned if I'm going to put the brand in the hands of
Mm.
someone, something, or somewhere that like could damage our brand. And so it's that's where anytime we sign an ambassador, I get people brought to me all the time, even influencers. And it's like I sit with them and I like first of all I want to see the background, but then I'll get on a call with David because I want to
Good.
talk to David and I want to hear what David like I want to hear from David and how he feels about brand partnerships and what are
Hmm.
his values and how does he like blah blah because at the end of the day like I'm turning the keys over in some ways that's but so
Yeah, it's like as a CMO now, you have to do like extensive background checks on what they've said historically, but also are they higher at risk to do something in the future that may hurt the brand equity, like we talked about earlier as well. Um, I wanted to ask you too, just like where do you think right now is the most undervalued attention in marketing today?
undervalued I think there's some I don't want to like if I start dropping brands then all of a sudden I get 400 emails or text messages but I think there's certainly social like platforms and ways. I'll give you one for example. Two would be, and I haven't even spent much time on it, but is Pinterest. Like
Yeah.
think about the visual search for betting tips or graphics. I mean, there's 500 million users there. It's very
Mm.
lifestyle driven. An area we're diving in much more in right now is Reddit. I mean, you think about the community power for authentic discussions. There's targeted subreddits and you can imagine I don't go there myself, but I talk to friends that they use Reddit to really help guide their maybe
Yeah.
what they want to place or what kind of action they want to
That's
take.
the
And
water cooler.
it's a water
Yeah.
cooler, but going back to something we talked about 5 minutes ago, be damn careful because if you step in as a brand and you're not quote unquote authentic or you're not like on you're not using the right voice or you're not providing a value to those users, watch out, right? Because
Yeah.
you will
Yeah.
you will be vilified. So there, I mean, there's a couple of areas that as I think about, quite honestly for us too, like we live in the sports and the gaming space, like how can we branch out more into lifestyle and like shoulder, kind of over-indexed areas just outside of
Mm.
sports and entertainment that we know our players like tap into, and that they consume or they have passion for outside of, gaming or sports.
I'm curious where you have seen it go, where it currently is, and where it's going. And as a social first agency, I will say, I think the Madison Avenue traditional, like only speaking from like a linear spot, right, is
Yep.
going away. But I still see brands that are spending millions and millions and millions of dollars on a 2 day shoot, and there's no social distribution plan. We're not asking talent to do anything on social or collabs. And I do think that that kind of like mindset is moving, of course, where that's just not going to be what is obviously optimized at this current time, but where we're going. So I'm just curious because you've done it for 30 years, what do you see in marketing that's starting to kind of end? And then what's like, where's that all going to in the future too?
Yeah. I mean, when I first got to Rocket, it was a very classic, like, all right, we went and shot the TVC, we spent X amount of money, and then everything got thrown over the wall, right? To
Right.
the social,
Right.
the .com, PR, whatever it might be. And I
Hmm.
started asking the question, like, why aren't we developing like digital social first ideas? It's not just chopping it up. And so very literally for the same exact daily shoot costs. We were still spending a lot of money on the TVC shoot. I'll give
Right.
you a good example. Is like the first one we did, I think, was like with Ricky Fowler, or Ricky was a partner of ours at BetM, or I'm sorry, at Rocket on the golf side. And so, yep, we're gonna go shoot a TVC with Ricky. But guess what? There's a lot of downtime. So as soon as Ricky, so the next shoot we did with Ricky, as soon as he was done with that shot, all right, turn to the right. And then we're
Yeah.
shooting stills, and he turned to the left, and he's up against a green screen or a
Hmm.
backdrop, and he's doing whatever, juggling golf balls or whatever it might be, or he's
Yep.
talking about the Rocket Mortgage Classic or the Tour Championship or the Masters, you know. And then we were peeling him off over this here, and he was doing selfie videos for clients, you know, like. So
Yeah.
now
Yeah.
for that same 250,000 a day production day,
Hmm.
now I got 400 or 500 assets versus one TVC. And so
It's a car wash. Yeah.
yeah, that was 10 years ago, but you know, it's 8 years ago now. But now it's the same exact thing. Like with this Jon Hamm, I mean, John did not sit for days, right? Because as soon as he boom, and so now it's like, all right, how are we developing digital and social first? But a lot of that it starts with the client, but it's making sure that the internal teams or the agencies, i.e., the integrated agency team is,
Yep.
that's where you got to step in as a client and make sure that, people aren't, just, they're holding their cards close to their chest. I mean, a traditional creative agency maybe is like hesitant to let the
Yes.
digital or the social team, come in. And I'm like, no, this is one team. And so
Yeah.
the digital and social second, third unit, like they need to be hooked in with the team or the agency.
Yeah, it's all what I've noticed too is like it's all one huge campaign and social is like a distribution. If you're going to do a hero campaign, there has to be a social distribution, social stunt. What is our ecosystem we can tap into? And it's great that you've kind of unlocked how to be most efficient there. I'm curious, just a certain campaign that you have admired over the years that wasn't necessarily under your umbrella, but you just loved
Ooh.
how it went through.
Uh, Listen, I'm gonna use my automotive, and people ask me like, "Hey, what's some of your favorite spots outside of your own?" I'm gonna go back to automotive. I mean, if I were to look at campaigns that like just made me stop in my tracks, the Volkswagen Darth Vader spot, which I mean, Christ, that was
Yeah.
probably 20 years ago now. And then, and one was more personal for me, but when in 2008 the Eminem, Born a Fire spot with Eminem and, Chrysler 200. Like I was on the agency side. We had just lost the business and I stayed on with the agency and that really inspired me. Like I want to go work at that company. And I ended up going to
Hmm.
work at Chrysler and I worked for Olivier Francois for 7 years and
That's awesome.
did multiple Super Bowl spots with him. And like those are, I mean, they're more personal. And then now as today, I sit back and I watch a brand like Liquid Death, where I'm like,
Yeah.
how the hell did they get away with like they must have no lawyers, no compliance
Yeah.
officer. They don't have anyone, like morality
Yeah.
police. I mean, I also am like, I couldn't even imagine what fell on the cutting room floor, what idea got killed. Like
I
when I
know.
when I every day it's in my feed and I'm like, I'm super jealous of it, but I'm also like, holy Toledo. And just think about how they've taken a
It's so
very
great.
boring, product, if you will, i.e. water, and, from the simple things of packaging and design
Yep.
to now their go-to-market strategy. Like, and now look what they've done. They've broadened their product portfolio. Now they have a right to do teas, and I don't even know if they do alcohol, but at a certain point,
Yeah.
I'm sure there'll be a seltzer, liquid seltzer,
Hmm.
whatever it might be. And like, so as a marketer, I get jealous of brands like that because I'm
For
like,
sure.
there is no rules. They don't have
It's
anyone hanging
funny.
over their head.
One of the founders, Hamid, has been on the podcast, and those two founders came from big brands that they're constantly were told no and all
Yeah,
the red tape, and they just literally like, I can't take this anymore. Let's launch a brand and do whatever the F we want, which
yeah.
is kind of
God
which
bless
is
them.
kind of nice. What's one marketing tool that you use, or maybe a trade or a newsletter, something that really helps you do your job well?
Yeah, I mean, once again, I'm probably showing my age, but listen, every day I get up and like I'm going Ad Age, Ad Week.
Yeah.
I use LinkedIn. Quite honestly, I'm on LinkedIn 5, 10 times a day, just
Mm.
scrolling and seeing what other brands or thought leaders and articles or posts or learnings. Like
Just being a
those are mine.
practitioner.
I'm a little more traditional. I'd be lying to you if like I go into a deep hole on subreddit or
Yeah,
Substack.
yeah.
Like I don't. I have the best of intentions, but I'm one of those curated. Like I like curated content, and like stuff that just pops up to the top of my feed, and
Mhm.
so I'm a little more traditional in those respects.
I would love to get your advice. I always try to ask this towards the end. It's like you've had an incredible career, and there's so many people that listen to this show that are maybe at the manager level, director level, even vice president, but they want to be a CMO of a large brand like you one day. What's the biggest piece of advice, or what have you learned through your journey that you would love to pass on to the up and comers?
Don't be an asshole.
It's a
I
small
don't
industry.
really. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, it's you know, I've shared like I'm very thankful and blessed, and I also kiddingly sometimes tell people like I don't get anything done with good looks and smarts, and
Yeah. Yeah.
as I get much older and my, more tenure in my career and what have you, it's, I look back and go, listen, there's not a day that I didn't make a mistake or learn something new. And what did I do with those moments? And same thing here. Like I make a mistake every single day, but it's also like, don't be an asshole. That's a little tongue in cheek, but it's,
Hmm.
that goes a long way relative to, how do you show up? How do you show up as a leader? How do you show up as a marketer? I mean, we've all seen marketers. You can tell who they are. You know, they're somewhere. I've only been three places in 30 years. And
That's crazy.
and but I love what I do, and I've been very blessed to work at three amazing companies, and and with including BetMGM, and I love what I do, and I appreciate every single day.
That's awesome. I'll leave you with this one. Just to all the marketers out there, what's one thing that, based on where you're sitting, based on what you've seen successful over the years, that you think we all should be leaning more into?
Don't be afraid to make a mistake. In
Mm,
that, and I have found myself, if maybe I get a little more settled or tenured into a role. I found this in my automotive, and I found this in myself at Rocket, is that the years started to progress. I found myself being less risk take. I found myself not
yeah.
wanting to take as many risks because, like, well, I tried that or blah blah blah, and like that's not me. And I
Yeah.
have to have
Yeah.
self-talk of
Or
like
trying to be perfect. Yeah.
trying to be perfect, or like, well, that didn't
Mhm.
work 3 years ago, or somebody didn't like that 3 years ago. Well, you know what? Like, I also preach to my team, look over the edge. If you're not looking over the edge, you're not looking far enough. Don't worry, there are plenty of people behind you that will pull you back. And but
I
that's
love that.
self-talk I give myself, of which,
Yeah. Yeah.
taking some risks, asking why, or not just taking, the path. No is the path of least resistance.
I love
I mean,
that.
my wife asks me to do things every single. I say no 15 times, hoping the request will change. But at the end of the day, you know what I'm saying? Like,
She keeps on pushing you forward. It's good.
you're saying there's a chance. That's what I always like to
Yeah,
say. You're saying
exactly.
there's a chance.
That's
So,
hilarious. Well, man,
yeah,
listen, thank you so much
yeah,
for
dude.
taking time with us and dropping all the knowledge for the listeners because I know I got a ton of value out of it, and I know they did too. So thanks again for hanging out.
Thanks for having me. Look forward to seeing you around soon.